and my role is to ensure that each of them has a fair opportunity to provide us with their insights and ideas. Now, we're tough. We have strict time limits for presentations, and we have a timekeeper. This is Pamela Wegman, and she is ferocious, and she will be a rigorous timekeeper. Here's the plan. Each of our candidates will present a 2-minute opening statement. Most of our questions allow for answers that are no longer than 2 minutes, and there will be a few pop-up questions for which we will only accept a one-word answer, yes or no. We'll rotate the sequence in which the candidates answer questions so that each of them has an opportunity to be first and last, and each candidate may present up to 2 minutes in a closing statement. We would ask that you hold your applause until each round of questions ends. All of us over the next 9.5 months will have a lot of time to signal our choices and to campaign hard. But today, we're here to hear, to process, to compare, and to expand our understanding of how Minnesota will be served by each of these leaders. Today, the Minnesota AFL-CIO is live streaming this forum. So to help us, if those of you with smartphones would take out the smartphone, go to the Minnesota AFL-CIO Facebook page and live stream this forum. That would be a great help in reaching out to as many Minnesotans as possible. I'm not going to take the time to introduce the candidates. I think you know most of them, all of them, and their biographies are in your packets. And so let's go right to the opening statement, and we'll begin with Erin.
Thank you, Marcia, and good afternoon, good morning. Brothers and sisters, my name is Erin Murphy. I am a registered nurse and a teacher. I am a mom and a state legislator, and I'm running for governor. I'm running for governor because I believe in a kind of politics that improves people's lives, and when we use that together, we can build a bright future for the people of Minnesota. I want to do that with you. I grew up in a working family. In my family, work was something that we did to build our family and participate in our community and build our future. My dad built cars for a living. He was a UAW member, built cars for a living in Janesville, Wisconsin. My mom raised us. I'm the oldest of 5 kids, and when I was old enough to take care of my siblings, she went back to work. She worked at the canning factory. We were surrounded by corn and beans. She worked at the grocery store behind our house. She cleaned houses for a living. I did that with her. They built a good life. We built a good life. And I remember every time UAW went on strike. And I remember because of the food we ate when they went on strike. We ate canned chicken over biscuits that my mom could make with gravy. It was delicious. We had side pork from my uncle's farm and powdered milk. I remember every time that they went on strike. And my dad and his brothers and sisters in UAW were building not only their capacity to earn, not only access to affordable health care and a pension, but they were building our community. And that is what we have done together in the House of Labor. We look out for each other. We stand together. And across the state of Minnesota, I see people doing that very same thing, working very hard to support their families and to build their communities. And we deserve a governor who's going to stand with them every step of the way. And that's what I will be when I am elected the next governor of the state of Minnesota. I can't wait for our conversation today. Thank you.
Rebecca.
I'm Rebecca Otto, running for governor, and I want to thank AFL-CIO for providing this great opportunity for us today and for the professional production. I also want to recognize Marcia Avner, and you know, she works so closely with Paul Wellstone, and Paul Wellstone was an extraordinary champion of labor, and so thank you for all that work you did to allow him to do that important work to fight for working families in Minnesota. I am running, and I want to be the most pro-labor governor since Floyd B. Olson. Right now, the politics of unfettered greed threatens our quality of life and threatens our valuing of work. We value work in this state. We value the freedom to bargain collectively and to organize in unions. Now, for me, this is a personal issue. I grew up, my parents were both in the musicians union, and it's meaningful for them. And in their retirement, they've got a pension. So I know that they'll have a roof over their head and food on their table, and they have health care security. I was in the teachers union. I was a licensed teacher in the Mounds View Schools, a proud card-carrying member. My husband's in the writers union, and hopefully my son's going to be in the IATSE union. So we're a union family. And the politics of greed is threatening working families and our future quality of life. And as your governor, anything around that will threaten our freedom to collectively bargain, I will veto. Because we must elect, you can clap, we must elect a pro-labor governor in 2018 to make sure that we stay special and we continue to value work and workers, and that work pays in the state. Thank you.
Tim.
Well, good morning, sisters and brothers. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for improving the middle class. I'm Tim Walz. I'm a public school teacher from Mankato, football coach. I'm a retired sergeant major in the Army Artillery and have the distinction of being the highest rank enlisted soldier in the history of this country to serve. But more importantly, I'm husband to Gwen, and I'm dad to Gus and Hope. And I think it's worth acknowledging this morning. I dropped Gus off. He's a fifth grader at Roosevelt Elementary School. And like millions of American parents across the country, this is what we work for. That's what it's about. It's about family. And after what we saw this week in Florida, the thoughts that go through our minds of what happens in the tragedies and what is it as a nation we can do to address this. I understand my responsibilities in this moment. I understand my responsibilities as running for governor of this state is to tackle the toughest issues, to build coalitions that don't look like they used to, and to talk about the hardest issues, not by dividing people, but by bringing those folks to the table. And I think for all of us, it's on our minds, it's where our hearts are at, but there are solutions that are there, just like these issues that the middle class come from. I know in my family, I watched the policies you fought so hard for. When my father was dying, a Korean War veteran, there was Social Security survivor benefits to make sure we had some boots to pull ourselves up by. There was the GI Bill and Pell Grants to make sure we got good jobs. And there was the unions making sure that we were able, my wife and I, to get good paying jobs with good health care and a secured defined benefit pension plan. Those are what this is about. We're here today not to fight about the issues, not to prove that the Republicans are wrong, not to try and say, look at us, we're the ones. We're here to make sure families have economic security. We're making sure our schools have the best teachers and they're safe places for people to go. We're here to say that it's basic human right to get health care and it should be affordable and accessible. None of those things will happen if we do not have the right to collectively bargain and strengthen our place at the table. As your governor, I'll be sure I'm that voice. I'll build those coalitions that we've proven, and we will make Minnesota a better place. Thank you.
And Tina.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Tina Liebling, state representative from Rochester. I was going to sit down, but after Tim stood up, I felt so short, I thought I better stand up. I know I'm way over all of you right now. Anyway, I'm really glad to be here with you this morning. I am the first DFLer elected in Rochester in many, many years. So I turned a red district to blue. I first ran in 2002. That year, I had the extraordinary opportunity to run with Paul Wellstone. That was the year that his plane went down, that we were all so shocked and grieving. But I got a chance to run beside Paul as a new candidate and observe a couple of things about him that have really inspired my political career. One is that he was always unapologetically on the side of the ordinary person, not the big shots, not the insiders, not the people with all the lobbyists to influence and get what they needed, the ordinary person. Secondly, he had extraordinary political courage, and I've tried to model my career after that. He would do what he thought was right, and then he would go home and try to explain it, and people would accept that because they knew that he was who he said he was. So I decided to run for governor for a couple of reasons. One is that in order to win this race, we have to be bold about the vision we're presenting to Minnesotans. A bold, clear vision. We have to let them know whose side we're on, because there is a side to be on right now, because wealth and power are being concentrated in fewer and fewer hands, and everybody else is being left behind to one degree or another. And the second thing is that the job of the governor is to stand up against some very tough forces. We have to be bold and have courage in office, and again, know whose side we're on, and I believe I'm a person who can do that. I'm also a person who really believes in labor. When I had the opportunity as a public defender, I was a strong member of my union, a union steward on the bargaining committee. Thank you. Look forward to talking with you further today.
Thank you, and we'll move into the questions now. Every candidate on this stage has signed the Minnesota AFL-CIO Statement of Support. It is in your packet, but I'm going to read to you the core principles that are part of that agreement. Number one, I will support the principle that all workers in both the public and private sectors have the right to form a union and bargain collectively in an environment free of interference, intimidation, or reprisals. Two, I will support workers' efforts to organize by issuing public statements, by attending rallies and supporting organizing, and by sponsoring public forums. Three, I will provide an effective voice for the working families of our state, and I will work to increase the visibility of working families' issues and the union movement, and I will oppose all anti-labor legislation. I will support project labor agreements and labor peace agreements, and I will urge employers to do at least three things. First, respect employees' rights to form a union by remaining neutral during union organizing campaigns. And second, recognizing a union voluntarily when the majority of employees choose to form one, and also bargain in good faith to reach an agreement with the union that represents the employees. I will oppose all attempts to make Minnesota a right-to-work state through legislation or constitutional amendment. Each of you has signed this. Tell us now what it means to you as an individual, and we'll begin with Rebecca.
My signature is my commitment to stand with you to fight any attempt to pass right to work, and I will be there and stand with you to make sure that we protect the freedom to collectively bargain and form unions in the state of Minnesota, and I will work with you to increase the ranks of union workers across all sectors, because that is Minnesota. That's what makes us extraordinarily special. And I'll tell you, in my office, this whole politics of unfettered greed that's lining the pockets of Trump and his buddies and is running over the rest of us and not investing in those things that are important to us and undoing social safety nets, it's got to stop. And there was an attempt to privatize the office of the state auditor. It's a watchdog office for the taxpayers of our state. And as a leader, I don't take the easy way out. I work to make sure I fight for good union jobs. My office has union workers. And the privatization, all that does is it's going to diminish the quality of life of our fellow Minnesotans, because they're not going to have a public pension to support them with retirement security, and they're not going to have the benefits necessary. And so I have taken my fight to protect my workers and support my workers to the Minnesota Supreme Court. And you can count on me as governor to make sure that we protect, again, what makes us special, that we value work in Minnesota, we value workers, and we will, and I will, with a veto pen, veto any attempt to diminish that. And also work to make sure we pass laws, depending what happens with Janus, which is just a couple of weeks away, the oral arguments, to make sure that we have laws like where we require private and public employers to deduct union dues from paychecks. So we support the unions. So we don't allow for them to make unions recertify. All those things get in the way of allowing for collective bargaining and that freedom that's so important, that makes us so special. So you can count on me to be there, to be at rallies, to show up, and to support you. Thank you.
And Tim?
Well, the statement of support I signed defines my time as a teacher, is defined through the labor movement and through my union, Education Minnesota. The first day I went into the classroom to teach, I knew everything. The second day I knew nothing. And I spent a career over that, and one that I'm very proud of, becoming Mankato Teacher of the Year, becoming a Minnesota Teacher of Excellence, and then being Minnesota's Ethics in Education Award winner. That came because I was given the freedom, the academic freedom, and I was given the opportunity through things that were collectively bargained to have security in my job, to create professional learning communities that made me a better instructor to deliver the critical education that our workforce and our children need to achieve the dreams that they want. The labor movement is not about securing only wages. Yes, it's a part of that. We want to recruit and retain the best people we can get, making sure that we have good health care so that we're healthy and we're doing our job, and making sure there's a pension there that after we give our heart and soul over 35 years, we can retire in dignity. It is far more than that. It is creating a professional community that delivers the best quality standards, whether it's in the building trades, whether it's in services to our patients in hospitals, or whether it's in those classrooms. And so for me, the statement of support is foundational and fundamental why we have the best trained workforce and the best educated population in the world and the best services and the safest highways and the things that we care about. Without that statement of support and without a governor who internalizes these things and understands everything stems from that, then we end up fighting rearguard actions. My pledge to you is I'll be the organizer-in-chief when we take that job. We expand to places where we need to go. We no longer play defense, and we walk through the Legion clubs in Sleepy Eye or International Falls and make the case that labor is the foundation of our economy and the American dream. Thank you.
Tina.
So over my career, and I ran 8 races for state representative, won 7 of them. I've always resisted signing pledges. I always felt that, because where this begins is with the no new taxes pledge. But when I read this statement, this was an easy one to sign because this is committing. It's not a pledge. What it is a commitment to something that I'm already very committed to. And so when I read this language, I had no hesitation whatsoever about making this commitment. Because I believe that organized labor has built the middle class in this country. And we're at a very significant place right now in our history. We're at a place where the 1% or the billionaire class, whatever you want to call them, are grabbing it all. And there is no law and no rule and no norm of behavior that will stop them. This is about power. That is the only thing that they understand. And the only way we're going to be able to hold on to what we've got and build a middle class again. We're at a moment of grave danger. And so I am 100% with you. Part of the problem that we've had in this country is that we've had an erosion of union labor. Unions are not only about themselves, they're about building the middle class and making life better for everybody, ordinary people, our kids, our seniors, and everybody. And that's why I'm proud to make that commitment, and I will stand with you to build and support unions as your governor. Thank you very much.
And Erin.
I practiced nursing at the University of Minnesota Hospital, where I took care of people who were having transplants and surgery. And I was always grateful that nurses are organized in the state of Minnesota, because if I'm going to be a strong advocate for my patients, I need a strong union behind me. For 14 years, I've worked with the Minnesota Nurses Association, first as an organizer, then as an advocate, eventually as their executive director. I know how important it is that we have a strong labor movement in the state of Minnesota. It is why I continue to be a labor leader. I was part of the AFL-CIO executive board. I have stood with you in all sorts of fights, in solidarity. And when I look ahead at the challenges that we face here in the state of Minnesota, I know we need to aspire to more than just wanting to win this election and make sure somebody who's in the governor's office will stop bad things. We need to do more of what we're seeing out in the field right now. When I think about the St. Paul Federation of Teachers and what they achieved in this latest contract negotiation, not only talking about their wages and benefits, but about the conditions in which those students are in the classroom, that's the work that we need to do. When I think about the partnerships that I am experiencing and seeing between labor and workers like Zaytool and fighting for basic rights for workers, that is how we're going to expand the table for us, and that is how we're going to expand our power and build our future. When I am the governor, I will not allow a Republican House and a Republican Senate to come to me with things like alternative licensure for teachers, or things like changing the way we negotiate contracts as a bargaining chip. I will say back to that legislature, go back to committee, you take that out, we will not negotiate over that at the end of session. I will not sign things like that or a massive tax cut into law, because when we gut the things that allow us as working people to stand together, we are weaker, and it is not okay. And we will not do that when I'm your governor.
Our next question. Healthcare costs continue to overwhelm working families. First, my question is, how will you work to strengthen worker health plans? And second, how will you defend Minnesota's public health programs? And third, how will you work to establish a Medicare-for-All system? Tim?
Yeah, first on the worker health plans, I think we can't buy the frame that so many of those want to make on this when we keep talking about Cadillac plans. Every one of us in this room, many of us sat at those negotiating tables, giving up wages and giving up better benefits to ensure that we had good healthcare plans that covered the things we needed, healthcare plans that did preventative, healthcare plans that had those basic health services in them. So the first thing we can do is ensure that the collectively bargained plans remain in place, that we strengthen those, we make sure that we know that those are the things that provide that security, that many of us as a teacher, allowed me to do my job because I knew I had good health care. I knew when my wife got pregnant, we had prenatal care. All of those things that we need to do. So I think continue to strengthen making the case in that. Minnesota's public health system is one of the envies of the country. The public health nurses and those folks working in this, absolutely critical. And what we need to do is, and this is what the job of the governor is, not just preach to the choir. Take this message further out. Public health services strengthen our economy. Public health services ensure people are at work, making sure employers are making money. Public health services are national security, making sure that we do not have outbreaks, that we have first lines of defense, all of those things that matter to make a healthy society, and we need to make sure they're funded. We need to make something that doesn't cost the governor anything. Talk about the good work being done by these people. Talk about the things that are out there to your neighbors who pay the taxes to make this work. And finally, I think moving towards a Medicare-for-All, which all of us know is on the horizon, making sure that happens. I'm proud to have voted for the ACA that expanded health care to millions of Americans, but we know there's more work to be done. The first thing we need to do is the folks in this state who are left out because the individual market failures, some of it by sabotage by the Republicans, some of it because we didn't have a public option. Either way, let them get into Minnesota Care. As your governor, then, making the case we should have every citizen covered with affordable, accessible, quality health care closer to home. And I think there's no one in this room really believes there's value added in the insurance companies. Figure out a way that we start as a state moving to a place where we deliver that care without the middleman in there. Thank you.
Tina.
Let's start with the understanding that health care should be a right for everyone, not a privilege, not something where you have to be with a certain employer, not something where you have to give up your wages in order to get decent health care. That should be our premise, and everything that we do in government should be moving us more toward the goal of covering people with the health care that they need when they need it, because this is not just an issue of people's pocketbooks. Of course, it's an issue of life and death for many people. And of course, it's also an issue of productivity. So this should be a fundamental thing that we work toward. I've done quite a bit of work in the legislature on health and human services, and I understand pretty well how this really complicated system works. I also understand that the ACA kind of undermined some of the union healthcare programs. The problem is we have to put people and their healthcare ahead of any insurance companies. And that's something that doesn't happen even in the Minnesota legislature too often. So we need to make sure that whatever we do, it doesn't erode what people already have. Secondly, I understood the question not as being about public health care, like public health, but about our public health programs like Medicaid and Minnesota Care. I've been working for years to get the insurance companies out of our public programs. They're wasting our money, and we should be using that money for care for actual people. And moving towards single-payer Medicare for all is something that I have a long-term commitment to. I have ideas about moving in that direction. It will not be easy, We have to stand up to the powerful forces, namely the insurance companies and the other people who are benefiting from the fractured, broken system that we have. And I'm the person on this stage who has demonstrated the ability to stand up to those very powerful forces. Thanks.
Erin.
I'm going to deliver health care we can count on. I met a woman just a few weeks ago who had a brain tumor. She had surgery while she was asleep. A surgeon came in and did a procedure that she didn't know about. The surgeon was out of her network, and now she is in recovery, and she is healing, but she got a $30,000 surprise bill. She never consented for it, but she got it. That's a problem. That's not health care you can count on. My very first job with the Minnesota Nurses Association was as an organizer, and I am today still an organizer. That is how I do my work. That is how I am successful. It is important to note that 25 years ago, when I was an organizer for the nurses, we passed Minnesota Care and led this nation in making sure that people had access to coverage. And I was also responsible for the funding for early expansion of medical assistance. When Governor Dayton was first elected and first inaugurated, it's the first thing he did was move people into medical assistance, and that was as a result of my work. So damn straight, I'm going to work for our public programs. With Education Minnesota, we created a public option for school employees and for teachers, and we've driven down their health care costs through the course of their negotiation and competitive bidding. And we need to make sure that everyone in Minnesota has access to that same deal. And that is why I believe it's time to open up Minnesota Care and make it available for anyone in the state of Minnesota, and set up the direct contracting, the infrastructure, so we can directly contract with providers, the nurses, the doctors, the hospitals, and move the health plans out of the middle of that equation, because they're using their tools to pad their bottom line and deny care, and that's no good for the people of Minnesota. And we can lead the nation like we did 25 years ago and get ourselves on a path to single payer, Medicare-for-All. The Congress right now is fairly constipated. People in Minnesota need help, and we're going to deliver that, and we're going to do that together when I'm the governor.
Rebecca.
Everyone in this room probably can think of a moment when you had fear around losing your health care security. And frankly, I think it's making people sick. We're tired we need freedom from fear of losing our health. We need health care security in our state. There's a lot of ways to approach this, and I don't think it's too hard. I think it's something we do. We stand up and say, enough of the politics of greed, and enough of the insurance and those people that are lining their pockets at the expense of lives and our health. And frankly, at the federal level, they're scaring people to death with the cuts they keep talking about into the social safety net programs. And so there's a better way. Currently, the costs are not sustainable. So our costs keep going up around healthcare. We got to do something really different. And I'm going to work 24/7 to make sure that we get to a Medicare-for-All plus or a single-payer plan plus, where every Minnesotan is covered and everyone receives a standard benefit set. And insurance goes away. And our providers, those people that keep us healthy, they're incented and rewarded for keeping us healthy. We get rid of all the administrative burdens. They're tired of all the junk they have to do in order to try to keep you healthy. Let them focus on keeping you healthy. And in that standard benefit set, it's going to include mental health services, substance abuse treatment services, family planning services, preventative care, all those things that we know that we need. And imagine getting to a place so that now as union members, when you're at the bargaining table, you don't have to trade wages and benefits to try to just keep your health care. Imagine what that would be like. So that's a better place that we need to get to. I've got this plan called the Healthy Minnesota Plan, and I will work 24/7 on this because lives depend on it.
For the people who are standing, if anybody is wanting a seat, I see 7 or 8 open seats if you want to move down here. Next question. Working people continue to feel one emergency away from the collapse of their economic stability. As the rich get richer, wage earners have barely recovered to 2007 pre-recession standards. For each of our candidates, what will you do to enhance economic security for the working people of Minnesota? And we'll begin with Tina.
Well, thank you. This is one of the very reasons that I decided to run for governor. Because when we look at what's happened over the last 40, 50 years, over a recent 40-year period, the productivity of American workers went up 72%, the average wage went up only 9%, and CEO compensation went up 950%. So this is absolutely wrong. This is destroying our country, and we need to turn this around. So one of the big things that we have to do is raise the minimum wage. Now, I am very inspired by the fight for 15, which is going on, but the reality is that $15 an hour in Minnesota right today is not even enough for many people to have a basic needs budget. So we need to get together and figure out how to actually raise the minimum wage so people who are working full-time are actually able to support themselves, at least at a minimal level, and figure out how to help the small businesses and support them instead of supporting, as the state tends to do, supporting the big shots and insiders, supporting the corporations, giving them tax breaks to build stadiums, and all that stuff that doesn't actually help the worker. We need to use state government to level the playing field and take the resources we have and use them to bring people's standard of living up so that they don't need government benefits. And this raises all the wages. And this is something that union members have always understood, that when we raise the bottom, that we raise everybody else along with it. So this is something, along with things like family leave and sick leave, which in this day and age, how can we not be requiring that everybody gets sick leave when they work? So these are the kinds of policies that I believe we absolutely have to fight for them. And if we compromise in the end, then we live to fight another day.
Erin.
I'm married to somebody named Joe. Joe is a small business owner, along with his partner Mick, and I think in 2008, their company almost went under during the recession. So I know what it is like, a lived experience of living on the edge. Our kids were in college, and Joe would love to retire, but he's going to keep climbing the ladder for a little bit longer to do his job because of that. We know from our experience that there is a concentration of wealth and a concentration of power that is starving our families. It's starving our contracts. It's starving our communities. It's starving the state budget. And when that continues, if that continues, we will continue as working people to struggle, to be vulnerable, to be in a place where we can be divided against each other and weakened, and that is not how we build our future. So we have to look to ourselves as we always have and recognize the strength and the power that is here and the tools that we use together, not only to support ourselves and each other, but to build that bright future that I know is ours. That is our ability to organize, something that I have done forever. That is our ability to negotiate strong worker contracts for our people, something that we have to protect, and not only protect, but strengthen for the people of Minnesota. That is voting rights and campaign finance reform, so that the power that is entrenched right now, the corporate power that is serving to divide people and weaken us across the state of Minnesota, is weakened in itself. We are the answer to what we're facing in the state of Minnesota. Labor has always been the solution and our way forward, and when we stand together, and I will stand with you as your governor. When we stand together, we can tackle those corporate interests and make sure that everyone who works for a living in the state of Minnesota has the ability to earn a living and support themselves.
Rebecca. Oh, sorry. We're good. Did you want to speak to this at all?
I did.
Okay.
I didn't?
No,
Oh
you
my
haven't
gosh,
spoken
I'm so
to this
sorry.
one.
Got it.
Enhancing economic security.
Okay, that was a brain fart. So here we go. I did have coffee before I got here. I'm focused on a bread and butter agenda, an economic agenda, because that's what Minnesotans are focused on. The same thing keeps us up at night regardless of party or geography. And when I was a little girl, 6 years old, there were 4 kids in my family, and I was the second oldest. My dad left. My mom had to try to raise 4 very small children. And so economic security is extraordinarily important. And my mom made it through, and we made it through, but focusing on those bread and butter economic issues are going to be critical for our state. We must raise the wage, so the floor should be $15 an hour. It's not a living wage, but we got to do something, so the fight for 15. I'm focused on, understanding what automation means and to workers and outsourcing. We have good jobs in our state, but we're bringing people in from other states to do that work. We should be using our Minnesota workers for projects. And making sure that we have the 21st century jobs. That's another really important thing for our state. I've got a plan to create up to 250,000 good-paying jobs in the clean energy economy. Those can't be outsourced, and they're lasting. And then making sure we have the trained workforce to do that work. So as governor, your job is to have that vision of what's the next big thing as the nature of work changes. And so anyway, that's what I'm working to do, is to have a strong vision to support working families, to make sure we have a quality of opportunity across the state, and to continue to show that we value work.
Tim.
Well, Tina did a really passionate and a beautiful job of laying out. As productivity went up, wages have stagnated, CEO went up. That is the fundamental problem that we have in this, wage inequality and what's happening. 60% of people in this country can't come up with $1,000 for an emergency, whether it's a medical emergency, whether it's a water heater, or whether it's their car. The vast majority of those people voted for the current occupant of the White House. The issue is us not identifying what the problem is. The issue is not having the passion that is right up here. Each of these is, Erin was absolutely right. The solution to this is expanding collective bargaining, expanding unions. We're right on this. What we have to understand as labor and those safety net things that we want to put in, absolutely, I'm proud to have voted for the 15 minimum wage. We should always strive for that. We should, and Tina is right again on this, it's absolutely unconscionable we don't have sick and family leave, safe time that's there, family time that would be there. All of those things we need to fight for. But what we need to understand is taking this message to hardworking Minnesotans. As your governor, I need to ensure that we're doing things like above billion-dollar bonding bills and making sure our trade unions are going back to work on projects that power this country, that use American steel, that build jobs right here, and that create real wages in real communities. Those are the things we go back and win those people back. They don't want to be in that position. They believe the current occupant at the White House had a better solution to them than what we had. We need to use this space that he has created to show them, we hear your pain, we're the ones that can fix it.
The next question is a one-word answer, pop-up question. Let's begin with Tina and just work right up the aisle. The question is, have you walked a picket line in the last year?
2.
That's a one-word answer. Tim?
Me? Yes.
Rebecca?
Yes.
This week in heels.
Okay. Let's go to the next question, and we will lead here with Erin. A growing number of elderly people lack sufficient income for even basic necessities like food, shelter, and health care. This is a problem not just for elders, but also their children, their grandchildren, and our communities to whom they turn for help. First, as governor, what state-level steps will you take to assure a secure and dignified retirement for all Minnesotans? And second, what federal policies will you advocate to strengthen the social safety net? Erin.
Minnesota is a big and tall state. And when you run for statewide office, you surely experience that in a very poignant way. We have people aging all over the state of Minnesota and sometimes living in fairly sparsely populated communities. And that creates a real issue for those of us who want to respect and honor the work of people who have come before us. And I do that. I will do that as the state's governor. First and foremost, know that I will stand with and fund our pensions. That is earned savings. That is earned salary. Our pensions, mine and yours, will be protected when I am the state's governor. They will be funded. That is bedrock for us, and I will not step away from that. But when I listen to people who are living all over the state of Minnesota, and I met a woman living on the Iron Range just a few weeks ago, and she is going through cancer treatment and has to drive from her small community to Virginia for her treatment, and she can't drive there all the time. Her family lives far away. They don't have transportation or transit available for her. So some of the solutions that are important for our respect and dignity for people who are aging across the state of Minnesota are counterintuitive. We have to make sure that there's transit in greater Minnesota, and we have to fund that. We have to ensure that our family members can care for their family members with paid family leave so that we can look out for each other. We need to invest again in things like community health workers and block nurses and community health workers who can support people in their homes so they can live there as they choose to for as long as possible. That human infrastructure that has been in place in the past has been whittled away because we're starving our state budget. If we respect the people who have come before us and their ability to live independently for as long as they choose in their homes, then we have work to do to bring that to life.
Rebecca.
Having been a member of the PARA board now for almost 12 years, Public Employee Retirement Association, I know how critical defined benefit pensions are to everybody. And so I'm a huge advocate for defined benefit pensions because that allows for retirement security. And when people rip on pensions, I always say to them, look, for the last 20 years in Minnesota, for every dollar we pay out in a pension benefit, 70 cents of that dollar came from investment returns. That's my work on State Board of Investment, where we invest about $80 billion or more in public pension funds. And so when people say to me, well, they shouldn't have it because I don't have it, that's not the right way to frame this. What we have to frame it as is everyone should have retirement security, and there's a lot more work we have to do to ensure that our fellow Minnesotans have retirement security. Otherwise, we're going to have a big public policy issue. So defined benefit, I'm on the board of PARA. I'm a member of MSRS. I've got a pension in there as well, State Board of Investment, so that we have to make sure that we have that. And TRA, by the way, has work that needs to be done, and I know Governor Dayton is trying, but it's extraordinarily critical. But we cannot move to DCs because it's the wrong direction. For federal, I would say we need to get to a single-payer plus healthcare plan or a Medicare-for-All plus plan. Healthcare security, as we know, that's the driving cost, and it is putting our senior citizens in untenable positions deciding between medication and food. That is absolutely wrong. It's not going to get better until we say no more to big pharma and to the insurance companies and say we got to get back to the common good and move away from that politics of greed. The other thing is the earned, safe, and sick time. That should be a national policy, and I will work to advocate for that as well.
Tim.
I know I don't have to remind us all again, but I think it's important for us to keep focus on this. This is making, as Marcia said when we started, this election is going to have vast consequences, both positive if we get our work done right or negative if we do not. The voting bloc 65 and older was the one that voted in the largest for the current occupant of the White House. After passing the tax scam that they put through, the assault on Medicare and Social Security is coming. It's already been there. On Medicaid, those things are coming. The elderly, those very people that were in that, did not believe we were there on their sides. This is about us taking a message beyond the four walls of the room we're in, taking it beyond labor, and taking it to those people out there who care about this. For me, it's all of us have a personal story on this. I'm just getting out of high school. My father's dying of cancer. I got an 8-year-old brother and a stay-at-home mom. Thank God for Social Security survivor benefits and his defined pension plan. You know what it did? It allowed her to go back and train as an LPN, enter the workforce, and help out. It allowed my little brother to get an education and help the workforce. We need to tell our neighbors these are not expenditures and these are not entitlement programs. These are investment in American workers' dignity and the economy. That's the part that we're not getting. So in Congress, I have fought back against those. I've expanded care into the VA, expanded those benefits that make sure as our elderly veterans get the care that they've earned. Those are things that we can take elsewhere, making sure that we come back to this issue of pensions are the security piece, making it easier for low-income people, low-income seniors to buy in earlier where they're not being scammed, and we tried to pass the fiduciary rule, which they rolled back again, making sure their retirement savings are safe. So as governor, as much as having the right ideas, which we all have, it's being able to articulate it to those very people who are casting votes that are going to be impacted by it. As your governor, that's my job as organizer-in-chief and teacher-in-chief to make the case that they're with us on this issue.
And Tina.
So this is a critical issue. You know, I didn't watch much of the Super Bowl, but I happened to see one ad one ad for a company, an investment company, and they were making fun of the fact that elderly people are continuing to work at jobs that they should not have to work at. They were making fun of that. It made me so furious, because this is the reality of what is happening to people in our nation. And it's just absolutely shameful. There are a number of things that we can do. And, they're all, I don't think we disagree on ideas and the basic premise that we have to move forward and fix this problem. But I want to just be clear. I support the Minnesota Health Plan, which is Senator Marty's single-payer plan. And part of that plan includes long-term care, which is something that we absolutely have to have so that people don't lose their small amount of assets just because they're on the other side of a cliff and have to be in poverty before they get the kind of help that they need. This should be a basic, something that everybody has access to when they need it, when they're older, whether it's home care or care in some other kind of a place. One of the things we have to do is get people to understand that this tax fraud, as Tim called it absolutely was a way for the 1% to get more and more of our nation's wealth and pay for it by cutting the stuff that everybody else needs, including Social Security, including Medicaid, including Medicare. I'm the only one on this stage who was a Bernie Sanders supporter, and I supported Bernie because I thought he had the right message. He was talking to people about what's actually going on, and people heard that message, and it resonated. And so when I said we compromise in the end, I just want to clarify that. What I mean is we have to fight for the stuff we believe in and set out a very clear message. Really fight for it, like not raise the wage in 5 years, but raise it now. And when we fight for the stuff that we really care about, if people don't get the message, we may have to compromise in the end, but not before fighting.
And our next question. Billionaires, corporate CEOs, and the 1% seek to divide working people along geographic, racial, and gender lines. How will you work to unite working Minnesotans of all backgrounds? And we'll start with Rebecca.
When I launched my campaign in January of 17, rather than going around and speaking and tell everyone what I thought was right to do, I actually held a listening tour. I went all over the state. We had over 36 community conversations. Anybody was invited. We had people coming from the other side, too. And I asked them what their hopes and dreams were for our future, but I also asked them what their concerns and struggles were, what kept them up at night. And you know what? Regardless of geographical, where you're located in the state, and regardless of party, the same things keep us up at night. That's keeping a roof over our head, food on our table, and healthcare security. And that theme happened over and over and over and over. So I have put together a bread and butter agenda. It's economic populism, and the DFL should never be afraid to run on an economic populism message where we improve all lives. We're focused on the common good and the working people of our state. That is what's made us great, and we can't forget that. So I have this agenda, and I'm working to make sure that we have the 21st century jobs that we can organize and make sure that support families, 250,000 of them, and I don't raise taxes to do it. That we make sure we have health care security for all, so that we get rid of the inequities in the system, and we get rid of the freedom of fear, so people can provide for their families and their health. That I have a plan to make sure that we have 2 years tuition free for any child in the state of Minnesota, no matter where you live. You get 2 years in the Minnesota state system. Those schools are all over the state. They can get 2 years vocational training, 2 years community college, or 2 years in a state university. Because you know what? Some of you are retiring. We need the next generation of tradespeople that are going to do this really important work for us. There's parts of our state where they can't find plumbers. They can't find people to work on their heating systems. There's all kinds of issues. So for me, it's really planning and making sure we're doing what's right and focusing on the common good. And finally, I have to stop.
Tim, how will you unite working Minnesotans of all backgrounds?
Well, Peggy Flanagan and I, the theme of our campaign is a One Minnesota, a place where those most impacted by the decisions we make in government have a seat at the table. We reject the notion of those who try and divide us racially. They try and divide us economically. Now as a geographer, they're trying to divide us geographically. That's a damn line that has to stop, but we know what they're doing. They try and make the case that greater Minnesota and pit you against the Twin Cities. They pit racial groups against one another. What we know is there's much stronger bonds in this state that share those common values. The issues of a quality education for all children, the idea of affordable health care, the idea of a fair and living wage. All of those are things that the potential to bring people in who aren't benefiting like those 1% of those billionaires, but quite honestly, weren't quite sure that we're on their side. When I ran 12 years ago, I ran in a conservative district that had had one other Democrat in 125 years, and he left the party. And I ran as a strong union member on collective bargaining. I ran on the idea of fair wages. I ran on the idea of universal health care. I ran on the idea it's nobody's damn business who you marry. It's certainly nobody's business who women go to see for their health care needs. All of those things resonated with people because they weren't ideologically in a camp. We can take this message joyfully. We can bring this state together. We can try and make sure we're not searching out ways to divide us further, and understand that many of you in here negotiate with good employers who want to pay a fair wage and be on your side. We don't want to demonize all business. We just want to beat the hell out of the bad actors and bring the folks in who want to build Minnesota. That is, as governor, is my job. Peggy and I see it. Not just as a slogan, but a one Minnesota that's stronger for all and can get beyond some of these superficial, petty arguments that are meant to distract us as more things go away from the working class.
Tina.
I love this question because I've been talking about this the entire race. This is what really got me into the race, that the 1% are grabbing more and more of our wealth, and that we need to use government to level the playing field and stand up against that. You know, when I ran in my district, as I said at the outset, I flipped a district from red to blue, and I always did it as a bold progressive. And people have asked me, how have I managed to do that? Because my district still has a lot of Republicans in it, and yet I've gotten elected time after time. And I think the way I've done that is two things. One is that I am who I say I am, and people know that, whether they agree with me or not. And the other is that they know I care about them. And that is something that we have to take across the state. And that is what will bring our message to people. Because, you know, what everybody has said up here is true. People have the same needs and the same interests across the state, but we have to let them know that we are standing up to the corporate interests. And too often we Democrats are confused. When we're in office, we say we're for the ordinary person, but then we do the same subsidies to the millionaires and billionaires, and we listen to the lobbyists who come to the Capitol. And we forget that we need to be there to level the playing field for the ordinary person. So I think that when we are who we say we are, people understand that. They know that we really do care about them. And one thing that we need to do is stop creating programs that have cliffs in them, because then people are pitted against each other. People know a lot of people are not doing well in this state, and so when they see that there's a program only for poor people, they say, why am I busting my behind and I have to do it all myself and somebody else gets something? We have to make sure that everybody shares in the prosperity of this state.
Erin.
After the 2014 election, I heard a lot of stories and chatter about the DFL losing its way with labor and with farmers. And I had spent a lot of time, and those of you who know me know that I have spent most of my career on the ground, in the field, meeting and talking with Minnesotans at their doors. And I've continued to do that as a state legislator, and frankly, Minnesotans have been my very best teachers. And I continue to go to the doors because behind every door is a Minnesotan with a story, a family with an experience. That is our path forward. So in 2014, we lost our election. And I went to some of the communities that were represented by Republicans that were strong red districts to understand what was I missing in that last election. I remember going to Melrose, and we had a meeting with the community leaders there. We had lunch together, and then we toured a dairy processing plant. There was a gentleman in each of those meetings. He was dressed in black, and he would not make eye contact with me. He toured us through that dairy processing plant. He lit up like a Christmas tree, talking about the work that he did. And at the end, I said, can we take a picture together? And he said, you know why I'm in black today? I'm in black today because I was going to have to spend my day with a Democrat. but I'll take my picture with you because you listened to me and you paid attention. When I think about what I hear from Minnesotans, when we hear about the divisions that we're experiencing, they're not necessarily about anything more than class. People are working very hard in the state of Minnesota and not getting ahead. They feel left behind, and that's not geography. That is race. That is gender. That is class. And we are the solution, and I have so much faith in our capacity together to build a bright future for the people of Minnesota, but we have to remember that people are working and feel left behind, and showing up is the answer to that. Showing up in our elections and our districts is the answer to that.
Here's a longer question with a one-word answer. In the last several years, the legislature has attacked numerous licensure provisions for some public, private sector, and certain building trade employees. This includes teachers, electricians, and nurses. When union workers are affected, will you agree to only support changes to licensing standards which do include an agreement with the affected union? One word answers. We'll start with Erin and go down the line.
Yes.
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 Collectively. Wage theft. Wage theft takes many forms, including denying overtime pay, refusing to pay for hours worked, or paying less than the minimum wage. Wage theft has been shown to be an intentional strategy used by bad actors in the business community. What will your administration do to stop employers from stealing from their workers? Tim?
You hear this a lot too, and I even heard this from union members in the last election. Well, I don't know how important right to work is if we don't have jobs anyway, that type of thing. Or the one you hear most common from folks, unions served an important purpose one time, they don't anymore. And I think about this as a young man. I built suntan beds in a factory in a southern state, and at any given time, I remember my partner, you're stapling on the beds and you're doing the mechanicals and all this. On any given day, somebody stapled their finger to the board, and then they were asked to go home without pay. Or I can still remember to this day spraying adhesive on those things with no safety equipment whatsoever. Those types of things of people not equating to this. Wage theft is criminal. It is theft. It's the same thing as when you cashed your check if they knocked you over the head and took the money out of your pocket when they went on. That is how it works. The public, though, sees this as the white-collar, wishy-washy piece of this. The way we do this is we educate people very clearly, this is theft. We make sure that the people that we're appointing to the Department of Labor and Industry are people who understand this and are friendly to the workers who understand if you work a day's wages, you get paid a day's wages. You don't short time people on overtime. We tried to pass an overtime rule, and they rolled that back in an executive order last week. This is why it's critical that these issues are going to be the responsibility of the governor of Minnesota and the ability to set the tone on this, that our good employers would never think of doing wage theft. They're being ripped off by people who have an unfair advantage. We need to go out and message this. This is a crime that hurts workers. It hurts the economy. It should be prosecuted. And if you make the case to the public, Minnesotans are fair. No one thinks this is a good idea. No one thinks this okay. They've simply masked it by calling it. We need to call it. It is criminal theft of wages for work, and it should be prosecuted every time it happens. And making sure that if you do it, the penalties are stiff enough, you know you're not going to, and the good employers are the ones that'll keep doing the right thing.
Tina.
So Woody Guthrie said these words. If you remember Woody Guthrie, he said, "Some will rob you with a six gun and some with a fountain pen." And the problem is that we've reacted more to the six gun, which of course nobody uses that anymore, and than we do to the fountain pen, which of course is a lot bigger and easier to do with the electronics and so on. But the basics of this is that when people who have power use it to steal from others, they should be treated like the common criminals that they are. We should not tolerate this. We should use every civil and criminal penalty that we have, and we should ban these companies from getting further work from the state. and do whatever we can to let them be seen as the bad actors that they are. It's as simple as that. Because corporate theft is worse than individual theft. And we have to stand up to these corporations, even if they're given money to our campaigns, which they shouldn't be allowed to do. Even if they have friends in high places, even if they have all those lobbyists at the Capitol, we have to treat them as the criminals that they are.
Erin?
I waitressed my way through college, paid for it myself. And the current occupant in the White House now thinks that tips should be collected by the employer and distributed. And that, to me, is wage theft. We know that this is an experience that Minnesotans have in the state of Minnesota. And from my perspective, we have to make sure that we are fully funding the Department of Labor and our ability to train and enforce so that employers can't get away with stealing wages from workers because we're not looking closely enough to make sure that happens. And that's what's happening right now. We've underfunded that function of the state government, and as the state's governor, I'll make sure that we're funding it properly, and the people that are doing that work of training and enforcement actually know what it's like to work on a job, because they're the ones that are going to be able to look out for that and find that solution. But that is not enough for me. We have to make sure that work pays in the state of Minnesota. Right? Project labor agreements. We need to make sure that prevailing wage, we need to make sure that that stands. And especially when we think about new industries coming into the state of Minnesota around renewable energy, let's make sure those jobs, building solar and wind, are Minnesota labor jobs. And if, as the state's governor, I have to intervene to make sure that those business deals include Minnesota's strong workforce, organized workforce, I'll do that too. Because our hard work should pay whether we're waitresses or members of the building trades or nurses or teachers. And if employers have the ability to steal our wages, that's no good for us, and I won't stand for it. And I will stand with you to make sure that earning our wages and our hard work supports our families.
Rebecca?
So being the state auditor for 12 years, I know how to stop people from stealing and making, just saying. I understand government. I understand how to make sure we have good government. And the thing that we miss a lot is when something happens that's bad, my first question always is that department or agency funded properly? Because whenever the cuts happen, whether it's FDA or whatever else, you look at the staffing and usually they are understaffed and you don't have people doing enforcement. So my first thing is to make sure that we are fully staffed, that we enforce this law, and that we use every method possible to enforce this law. Look, there's technology now. There's lots of things we can do. But I'm also going to ask labor to help me do that. I think some of you could specialize in this and help me make sure we're doing everything we can as government to make sure that no one is experiencing wage theft. And frankly, you know, this is a social justice issue. Because if you think about some Minnesotans who are working in jobs, and they might be migrant workers, people can be preyed upon too. We can't allow for that in Minnesota. And so anyway, so we will make sure we have the staff, the training, that we're using every tool in our tool belt, that you're going to help me, and I'm going to partner with the CTUL, others that are working on this issue, and I will also partner with AFL-CIO on this issue to make sure that we have all hands on decks, all eyes. The more eyes you have on a problem, we know as the state auditor, the more eyes you have out there watching, the better we do. So this is something that we're going to work on together to make sure that Minnesotans receive a fair wage, and that those that are in a position not in power, that they're not victimized by an employer.
Tim? Oh, we started.
I did it. I'll do it again.
No, we're good. Thanks. Here's a controversy. Some economists and employers say there's a worker shortage affecting Minnesota and the country. Others say wages and benefits are not competitive enough to attract workers to the industries that are claiming shortages. What do you think, and what should be done to address both sides of this issue? And we'll start with Tina.
We have a problem, and it is very well stated in this question, and both of these things are really true. We do have worker shortages. We hear about it all the time. But we also have people who aren't able to earn a living wage. We have people who aren't able to get into the job market because they have something, either it's they have a felony on their record or they have a disability or some other thing. So one of the things I think we really need to do is to put the responsibility on employers to pay decent wages and stop using government to subsidize their ability to pay low wages. And so what I mean is, for example, when we hear employers say we need workforce housing that our workforce can afford, what does that mean? It means they're not paying enough for people to be able to have a place to live. So we have to stop just giving out money and saying, we got to partner with people. I'm not saying we shouldn't do that. But we have to recognize that they need to raise wages, and we need to raise the minimum wage for that. The other thing is we do need to attract and keep good people in Minnesota, and part of that is our quality of life. So when we invest in things like all of the, even services for people with disabilities, for example, a lot of people move to our state and want to be here because we are better than many places for people with disabilities. All of the things that are quality of life. 2 years free college or vocational education, I was the first to propose that. I think that would be a great help to our state, bringing people here, keeping people here, giving our students the ability to get the education that they need to be able to qualify for some of those higher paying jobs. So this is not a simple issue. Equity, racial diversity and equity and welcoming immigrants is also a big part of this because our demographics are changing, and we need everybody to have a piece of the dream and be as well as productive as they possibly can.
Erin.
Well, the obvious answer to me is both and to the question. We do have workforce shortages in the state of Minnesota, and we do have a lot of low-wage jobs and a lot of pressure to continue to pay people less than what they're worth in the workforce. For me, there are some fundamental things that we need to do that rest in our hands. In Minnesota, it's time for us to deal with immigration. They're not doing it in Washington, D.C., and we need people to come here to choose and bring their creative minds and their hardworking selves to build the future of our economy. We need to take care of student debt and relieve it, and from my perspective, it is a sin that the federal government is making money off of student debt. It is inhibiting young people's ability to participate fully in this economy. The Congress should fix that, and when they don't, we will have to take care of that here so that people who are coming out of school ready to work can actually participate fully in our economy. And I think it is time for us to recognize that the fundamental of strong public schools all over the state of Minnesota is the answer to this solution, making sure we're focusing again on the things that build our future, trades in the school, and relationships between our community colleges and employers. There's a woman I met named Tracy Tapany. She is an employer in Stacy, Minnesota. They're doing manufacturing. She's having a hard time getting a workforce for her, and she's doing the work in her business by herself to train that workforce. The partnerships that are built between community colleges and manufacturers will yield good jobs for people. So do the apprentices that come from the building trades. They will build good jobs for the people of Minnesota. We have to recognize that within ourselves is the answer to this solution. Employers are going to try and cheapen our labor workforce, and we can't stand for that, and that's why it's important that we continue to stand strong together as organized labor. But both and is the right answer to this question, and that's how we proceed.
Rebecca.
So I'd say there's two parts to respond to this. First is that some of the industries claiming worker shortages are not providing for competitive wages and benefits, and so that's one. Two, and I work to address that with some of my plans, but two, we do have some worker shortages in some areas, and so that's why I have put out this 2-year tuition free, and I want to spend just a minute on this to help you understand why it's so very important. So any child in the state of Minnesota gets to do 2 years in the Minnesota state system, schools all over the state, and they can do vocational or a community college or a state university. And here's the deal. What's required of them to get this is they have to maintain a GPA of 2.5 or better. They have to find a mentor in their chosen field, and that could be someone in the trades, right? And so I'm trying to assist our trades unions to attract that next generation of workers. And I know there's a lot of outreach going on into the schools. They're going to have to do 25 hours of community service and then finally stay in our state for 4 years after they graduate. There's another neighboring state doing this right now, and you know what? Our young people are leaving our greater Minnesota communities and they're settling in another state. We got to stop that and keep our people, build our people, and grow our people. And also, there's parents that have incurred debt for their kids to go to school, and they're not going to get to retire any time in the near future. So I'm really working to make sure we're getting at those bread and butter issues that keep us up at night, to make sure we have a quality of opportunity, that we continue to increase our numbers in the trades rather than decrease.
Tim.
There's that old adage that people don't move to Minnesota for our values, but they stay here for them. And I think it's the Minnesota Lutheran in us. If you do a good deed and talk about it, it doesn't count. The job of the governor is to talk about it, talk about what's happening, talk about the growth that we have. We're going to have to be very clear about this. The message that we hear on the other side is, we're open for business. These states that say we're open for business, that means that they want to pay a low wage, it means they want to go right to work, and it means they want to get rid of regulation. That's an enticing thing that does that. The funny thing is, the economics don't show that. After Act 10 passed in Wisconsin, and again, if the states, and they are right now, the laboratories of democracy, that laboratory's on fire next door, just to be clear about that. Act 10, what it did was, it created so much instability in the teaching. Teachers were pillars and stood in their community. They stayed, they gained longevity, they gained tenure, and they were involved in their community. The churn that's going through there is so great, they've got no stability. And guess what's happened? The outstate or rural districts lost that. They went down from having about 10 or 11 years average experience down to less than 4 now. They are fleeing, they are coming over. What we need to understand, and the job of the governor is to connect the dots for people. It starts with collective bargaining, strengthening schools, creating the trades that people can earn an honest day's living in, making sure the things Tina is exactly right. Workforce housing, that better be there or they're not going to come. We can't hire people to teach in Fairmont because we don't have jobs. And Rebecca is exactly right. We have an incredible workforce out here in equity, especially our children of color, that we cannot leave behind. We cannot leave them behind morally, and we cannot leave them behind economically, because it is not just a gap of children of color, it's a Minnesota gap. So as governor, ensuring that you come here, high quality of life, you're going to be paid. Both of these things are true if we don't pay, but we have got to have a message that says we're not going to race to the bottom, we're not going to put workers at risk, we're going to pay people with dignity, and that's why they come.
The next governor of Minnesota will need to build a broad and a diverse coalition to win in November. As governor, when there's conflict within your coalition, how will you keep working people and their needs at the center of the conversation? And we'll start with Erin.
I will do what you've seen me do for the last 12 years, and before that as your sister in labor with the nurses. When I'm elected governor, I'm going to lead in the same way I have. I'm going to stay with the people of Minnesota. I'm not going to hang out just inside the Capitol. I'm not going to hang out in the residence, but continue my work in our communities and on the doors with the people of Minnesota, because the power of this office rests with the people of Minnesota, and I won't forget that. If we want to build the future that I believe in, it's going to take all of us. And you've heard me say this to you individually many times. The campaign is about building the narrative for our future. The campaign is our ability to begin bringing Minnesotans to our ideas about an agenda. And when I get elected, I don't want to call you up and say, hey, let's talk together and figure out how we're going to build this future together. We're doing that already. We're doing that now. We're having those conversations. I'm having those conversations with the people of Minnesota right now. It's a different kind of politics to put us back in it again, but I'm going to do that as the governor, and working people will not just be in my mind. They will be at the table with me. We will do this work together because I cannot do it alone, and when I think about the challenges we face, and we face some tough ones, the only way we master those challenges is if we stand together. So when we get to the rough spots, and we will, because we already have, we will be in conversation, in communication, in coalition together. So we won't surprise each other. We won't let each other down. We will stand together for working people and for the people of Minnesota. That is how we build our future together. That is how I have led for the last 11 years. You can bank on that with me because you know that is who I am.
Rebecca.
So I'm not keeping any cards hidden from you. They're all on the table. I put out this agenda called the Renew Minnesota Agenda. It was informed by Minnesotans around the state. It's about bread and butter. It's about working families. It's about valuing work, valuing our workers, and valuing that work pays. So that's my agenda. Now, are there going to be times that we agree to disagree? Absolutely. I've been married for 30 years. You can clap. And 30 years, you never agree with anyone 100% of the time. We know that. But what I can always guarantee to you is as we work through this and work to make sure that we protect what makes us special as a state, so we don't go the direction of some of the other states around us, I'm going to listen, and we're going to problem solve and work through it. But you know, having to run for state auditor, I'm the only one at this table that's ever run and won statewide. And I've always told the AFL-CIO groups, I'm going to be the engine at the back of the ticket pushing it forward. I'm not about a coattail race. And I had to run statewide in every single community as state auditor. Now, I know you're probably thinking, state auditor, that's not the sexiest job in the world. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. But it's extraordinarily important, and it served Mark Dayton well. It served Arnie Carlson well. It served because state auditor, you get to see how the finances flow through federal, state, local. You understand the financial condition of our communities. You work in farm finance. You work in public pensions. You work in investments. You work in natural resource leases, land exchanges, affordable housing. And so I am ready to go on fighting for those issues that keep us up regardless of geography, regardless of political party. And what I find very encouraging is I've had some folks contact me who left the party, and they were more on the labor side. They said, we love you as state auditor. How do I vote for you for governor? I said, easy, just do it. But I'll tell you more in a minute.
Tim.
Well, thank you. And this is the space where I've staked out my life. It's who I am about finding effective solutions, whether you can dismiss it of building football teams into state champions or building the most effective artillery battalion in the world, and now working in Congress. When the New York Times this summer said, if you want to know how Congress is supposed to work, look at the VA committee. That takes the ability to build coalitions. And I've been disparaged and called a compromise candidate. I will compromise in the best interest of the American public. I will not normalize behavior, and I do not demonize people on purpose, but if the president decides he wants to throw some stupid military parade, I'll call it the stupidest damn idea ever seen. Those are things that we can do. But I don't spend my time trying to divide us. I try and find the joyful ways we can build people together. You saw it, and it's not just politics. You witnessed it last week. Peggy and I have built the strongest coalition, winning 7 of the 8 congressional districts, building a strong coalition with the understanding there are wonderful people sitting here. The person I'm focused on is Tim Paulini and the money that's coming, of building a winning combination of making sure that we're there, because all of the things we're talking about will go the other direction if we don't win that. So it is about getting effectiveness. It's about bringing people to the table to make sure that they have their voices heard. It's making sure that you're governing in a way that people don't just see you showing up there, but what are you going to do to get it done? It's understanding you dive into the hardest issues. The first day I announced I went up to Virginia, because I'm not going to shy away from keeping clean water and talking about mining and jobs. I live in southern Minnesota, where I talk about farming and talk about how do we do buffer strips and clean water. And I'll tell you this, like all of you, I understand my responsibility, my frustrations, and my growth on this. I am done with school shootings. I'm done with not finding solutions. I'm done with posturing. I want to bring the people together who own the guns and who know that we shouldn't be having them in schools or whatever happens. Those don't mean that you're right all the time. It doesn't mean that you posture to people. It means you have the capacity to build coalitions to improve people's lives. With your support, we can do exactly that on a whole range of issues.
Tina.
Well, a lot of people who own guns have actually been on the right side for a long time. It's the NRA and the gun lobby who's kept people from coming together around the issue of guns. But, I think that what we need to do, when we're thinking about Tim Pawlenty, who's such a man of the people, it's just a very few very rich people that he's a man of, right? Very few and very rich. We need to understand which side we're on, and we need to stop stereotyping people by geography, by race, by background, and by gender, because people across the state do need a lot of the same things, and we need to recognize and be letting them know that we know that. And that is things like clean water. And you know, you can't always be on both sides of things. So, for example, with clean water and buffers, you know, a lot of farmers really do understand that we need to have clean water. But you know what? If they say, no, I'm not going to do these things, and we try to help them do it, and they just put their foot down and say, I'm not going to, guess what? Clean water, the ability to have clean, safe water, is the thing that has to win. So you can't always be on both sides of everything. We have to know who we're for, and that is for the average, ordinary person who needs us on their side. And one of the reasons that I'm running is because once you're governor, you have to be very clear about that, and the pressures are enormous. And we've seen Governor Dayton under a lot of that pressure. And sometimes he hasn't really stood up to it the way some of us would have liked. And you can't afford that. When you have the reins of power, you have to use it so that people understand whose side we are on, and let them know that we are acting for them and not for the lobbyists and not for the big shots and not for the insiders and not for the people with the money, but for the people who don't have the time or the energy at the end of a long, hard day to come to the Capitol to tell us that they need us to be on their side. We should know that. That should be who we are at our very core, and that's who I am at my core.
We have one more question, and it's a big picture question, and then we'll have closing statements. Workers coming together in union has reshaped what labor standards look like. That's from child labor laws to OSHA to the right to organize. So for each of our candidates, what do you believe is the most exciting and revolutionary fight that working people are engaged in today? We'll start with Rebecca.
You know, I've got to recognize again Janice. So oral arguments are coming in 2 weeks, and there's been a lot of organizing going on. And so just recognizing that, there's been some extraordinary work going on over the last year or so, and to prepare for that, and depending on how that comes out, hopefully it'll come out in a good way. I would say another big fight right now is Fight for 15. We have to raise the floor. We have to raise the floor for all Minnesotans, and it's going to strengthen unions and help you as well. And so to me, that is a very important fight. It's not a living wage, but that's another conversation. And then one editor of a big newspaper said, Rebecca, what if it's not enough? And I said, then raise it more. The legislature can do that. But we have to have a plan, and we've got to raise. This is a big social justice and economic justice issue. So I would say that's a really, really important piece right now. Again, I just say the fight for the freedom to collectively bargain, that's a big battle going on right now. We got to continue to do it because the threat of right to work or not having the freedom to collectively bargain is a huge deal. And so, you know, we have to have a governor that says, I will be here for the people. That's what makes us special. And I don't need to repeat that again because you know that's what I believe and that's what I'll do. I'll veto anything that attempts to take away our right to collectively bargain and organize in unions.
Tim.
Well, all of us in this room, I think, see and understand we stand on the shoulders of giants. But I think what many of us, especially under the last couple Republican administrations, have understood is each generation is going to be re-asked to fight those fights. Who would thought we were still fighting child labor laws? Who would think we're still fighting for Lilly Ledbetter and fair pay, equal work, equal pay? There is a time now, and as again, this administration has opened up a space for us to not just complain who they are. We know who they are. We don't need to spend time on that. But tell the American people who we are. And I think the labor movement now, one of the opportunities we have, and I see it happening, is to step into this breach on sexual harassment and the Me Too movement. We've always protected workers in their workplace. We've always asked for equality in the workplace. We've tried to do it. This country is struggling with this. It's difficult for people to talk about. They're not sure where it's at. They're not sure where that line is. We know in Minnesota, and again, I don't dodge the hard subject. When the situation came up with Senator Franken, it ripped at many of us trying to figure out where this goes. Labor has that capacity to open that again. Labor has been at this. We have collectively forgot our history. Us in this room know who took beatings on lines, Who was killed doing this? Who lost jobs for doing this? Who was ostracized for doing it? Now it's a quaint story when they say that labor used to matter, they don't anymore. Those same fights are being fought by every generation. And if the Me Too movement opens it up by the public's, we call this in teaching a preparatory set, they are ready to hear what we can do. And so I encourage all of us to make that case, to show what we're there for. This is where people are looking for leadership. This is where people are looking for someone who stands with them. And for those people in the workplace where harassment has simply been tolerated, like so many things that we said we're not tolerating it in labor, we fixed it, we collectively bargained, we enforced, and we made a difference. And for that, that's exciting to me that we're relevant right in this space.
Tina.
So the question's about what is inspiring you, the most exciting and revolutionary fight working people are engaged in today. And I think all of us in this room probably have moments when we feel like, oh my God, what's going to happen? It can be very discouraging. But there are also these wonderful moments when you feel inspired. And what really has inspired me lately is the Fight for 15 movement. And when I see the people carrying those signs, once again, and this goes back to the sanitation workers in Memphis that Dr. Martin Luther King stood up for, when I see those signs that say, I am a man, when I see those signs that say, I am a woman, I am a person, I find that incredibly moving because this is about human dignity and freedom. Being able to organize, being able to stand together and fight to have a decent life. Ordinary people who have a lot to lose and who've said, I'm going to cast my lot with my fellow workers and I'm going to fight for the things that we all need, even if I pay a price. That's really inspiring to me. That's what we all need to do. We need to find those moments of hope and inspiration because this is really tough. We are at a moment of huge peril in this country where we could just tip right into authoritarianism. And it is the ordinary people. I call them the heroes of Minnesota, the people who get up every day and do what they have to do to support themselves and their family, and even if they have a little bit left over to do something for their community. And these are the people who are getting up and fighting for 15, and it isn't enough, and we ought to fight for 15 now, not in 5 years, now. Because people can't live on 15 now, and they certainly can't live on our current minimum wage. So that's what inspires me. When people stand up and say, I am a human being.
Erin.
I am inspired almost every day by what I am experiencing on the ground and with the people of Minnesota. I'm inspired by young people who are not satisfied with the status quo politics that continues to deliver a status quo future. And instead of waiting, they are engaging and running for office and in participating in organizing efforts on climate, on healthcare, on student debt relief, on race and disparities and structural racism. They are not happy to wait. They are not happy to hear your turn will come. They understand that their future depends on our ability to join with them and stand up for an honest kind of politics. A progressive kind of politics, a politics that is about us again. After the 2016 election, how many women have signed up to run for office because they are frustrated with the status quo and they know that they have a voice and the capacity to make a real difference, and so they're stepping up across the state of Minnesota. I have been watching young people saying, I'm going to run for office, I'm not going to wait. And they're running for city councils and school boards and county boards and for the legislature, and in some cases, challenging incumbents and winning the seat because they're impatient. I want that same impatience right here with us. I feel it, and I want more for us than to just be defensive, to think we just have to win this next election. We have to protect what we have, because around us, right, are red states. Around us are red states, but what I see in us is the front line of a progressive fight for the future, not just for Minnesota, not just for our families, but for the soul of this nation. We are facing a tremendous fight, and behind us is an army of young people who want to join us and fight for the same things that we have been fighting for, and the new organizing models, new organizing abilities, those are the things that are going to deliver that future for us.
We move now to the closing statements, and we'll do these in the reverse order of the opening statements. And so we'll begin with Tina.
Well, thank you all so very much for your attention today. We are on these stages a lot together, and it's really interesting because you hear your own words coming back to you at times, and I know I sometimes we pick up each other's language, which is not a bad thing because I think we all agree on most of the big issues. We are all DFLers here. And so I think that there isn't really any disagreement that we want ordinary working people to move forward. But the question really is, how do we make that happen? How do we win this election? And once we're in office, how do we govern to build that instead of letting it continue to erode? And so I believe, going back to what I said at the beginning, that the way to do that is we have to be who we say we are, and we have to let people know very clearly that we care about them. And what this has meant to me over the years is that I never considered that I got elected to get re-elected. I always considered that I got elected to do what I thought was right for the people that I was representing and for the entire state, and that's been what my career is about. So I've always stood up for things like marriage equality. I've always stood up for racial equity, even if I didn't know for sure that that was going to be a winning coalition, especially at the beginning of my legislative career. But people have appreciated that because they do know that I care about them. We have huge issues to tackle in this state, and it's not going to be something that a governor can do alone. We're all going to have to continue to be involved, to put our energy forward, because this is going to be an effort that's not just going to be about one election. Elections are not all about the last day. They're about continuing. It's about organizing, something that all of you know so much about, that we've got to continue to explain to the ordinary working of people of this state that we are on their side. And that means really being on their side, standing up to the corporations that may offer us some jobs but want to pollute our water for 500 years. We can't afford that in Minnesota.
Well, thank you to AFL-CIO, thank you to Marcia, thank you to these three incredible leaders up here who are passionate about Minnesota, and thank you to all of you for the work you do daily, but probably most importantly in the space we occupy in 2018 with the current occupant of the White House. Thank you for believing in our democracy. Thanks for believing that we collectively can make a difference. As I told you earlier, I'm a school teacher, a dad, a veteran. We're all a lot of things. The one thing I never saw myself was I didn't prepare my life to run for office, but I think my life has prepared me well. I think what I understand is building things that improve people's lives, that it's about relationships. And as running for governor, one of the proudest things and one of the things that keeps me motivated is that I need to do this in a manner that reflects the dignity of how you live your lives and the hopes and dreams that you have. And these campaigns, make no mistake about it, they're job interviews. Ridiculously long, stupidly expensive job interviews, so we all know. But they give you a glimpse in how you're going to govern. I'm proud to have Peggy Flanagan on this ticket. I'm proud she's on early. I'm proud she's a woman of color. I'm proud she's accomplished. I'm proud she's a mom, so many reasons. But we start to look like Minnesota. I'm proud that we've created a campaign that people want to come work for, paying that living wage, paying that health care, being the model of what you want. But more importantly, building that broad coalition around the state, not allowing them to pigeonhole us and saying, oh, he's the greater Minnesota candidate. I'm proud of the support I received in the Twin Cities last Tuesday night. We can do those things together. Those campaigns are meant to show how we can govern with the intention and what I've always known. It's most important after we win the election that we bring the coalitions together that improve people's lives, that get at the heart of the things that they want. Because when it's all said and done, people just want health care. They really don't want to have to use it, but if they do, they want to be taken care of. They want their schools to be good so their kids have a chance, no matter what color of their skin, what their religion, wherever it would be. And then they want to have a good job so they can spend the money on the boat and go catch some bass in the summer or go on a vacation or spend time. That's what it's about. So my pledge to you on this campaign was to run a positive, joyful, and winning campaign. Give me your support, and I would be honored to be your next governor. Thank you.
Rebecca.
Thank you for your time, your patience, listening, and I'm Rebecca Otto. I live in May Township on a small farm with my husband of now 30 years. Our son graduated from school and he's working with his hands because he said, Mom, that's what I want to do, and we're really proud of him. We've got to elect a pro-labor governor, and we need to get a pro-labor House of Representatives back. That's going to be critical in 2018. I'm the only candidate on this stage that's ever run and won statewide. And when I ran for state auditor in 2006 against an Anderson, we beat her by the largest margin in 112 years against an incumbent. And we didn't get the governor's seat, so I'm not a coattail race, and I never will be. My job is to work to make sure that we elect House candidates around the state. I've got the bread and butter agenda that's going to make that happen. Because your agenda should be great regardless of geography and regardless of party. And I'm being told that my agenda is the right agenda. Now, when Pawlenty ran, he is the guy that's being named. I'm the perfect person to run against him. I'll clean his clock. I'll tell you why. Number one, when he was on the ballot and I was on the ballot and we lost the governor's seat, I won more raw votes than Tim Pawlenty. And I won more rural counties than Tim Pawlenty. And when Governor Dayton has run and been on the ballot and I've been on the ballot, I've won more rural counties both times. I won 50%. That's significant. I have strength statewide. I've worked with fire chiefs, volunteer firefighters, township supervisors. They know me and they trust me. I'm abiding by the DFL endorsement. I don't want to waste resources of any organization on fighting in a primary, so I'm abiding. I'm here today to ask for your support because I want to win in 2018, and I want to protect our Minnesota values and what makes us really special. I want to work to fight side by side with you to protect the freedom to collectively bargain. Thank you.
Erin.
I am a nurse and a teacher and a mom and a state legislator, and I'm running for governor. I'm Erin Murphy. I want to earn your support. I want to earn your vote, but mostly I want to earn your trust because we need that in our politics again. I grew up in a big Irish family, and when I hung out with my family, the adults played cards, and my cousins, and I had a lot of them, ran outside into the night. I stayed inside with the adults. They didn't want me there, so my penance was to mix their drinks, and I could make a whiskey and a water and a brandy and a water and pour a beer. They played a card game called euchre, and I sat and listened to them talk. And they talked about our family and the little town that I was born in, Columbus, Wisconsin, and they talked about politics. And they taught me about a powerful kind of politics that is about improving people's lives, and I still believe in that today. I chose nursing because I care about people. I'm in politics for the very same reason. And 11 years ago, when I ran for office, a woman said to me, if you get elected, remember, your job is to represent the entire state. And I have taken that to heart and spent my time all over the state of Minnesota, and Minnesotans have been my best teachers. I want to build our bright future. That means strong public schools for our kids and for our communities. Single-payer healthcare we can count on. Infrastructure and the jobs that build our economy and support our families. I believe in a kind of politics that digs into the toughest issues, and we have some in front of us, and it's time for us to take those on. Let's build a renewable energy economy for our future and protect our clean air and our clean water. Let's take on gun violence and move the NRA out of the middle of that discussion so we together, Minnesotans, can enact common sense gun violence prevention measures and protect our kids and our families across the state of Minnesota. The tools of our democracy are under attack in this nation, and we know it best. I will protect those as our governor. It is important that we stand up for an honest and progressive vision for the people of Minnesota. That's why they vote for us. That is how we'll prepare to govern. And let me just say this. I am Irish. I am a nurse and calm in a crisis. I'm cool in a conflict, but Irish, and I'm a fighter, and I'll fight every single day for the people of Minnesota. Thank you very, very much.
I want to thank Thank you to our candidates for their courage, conviction, their passion, and their hard work. President McCarthy will bring it home.
Okay.
Well, let's give a big round of applause to our moderator, Marcia Avner. So I'd also like to thank our candidates for their time and commitment to working Minnesotans. It was a great event. Thank you. So before we end the conference, I want to encourage both the candidates and attendees who have the time to stick around and mingle for a while. Thank you once again for everyone who attended. The Labor 2018 campaign for labor has officially begun. It's going to be up to all of us to get the word out to fellow union members why this election is so important, and I think you heard from the candidates today.